This podcast series is presented by Archetype. Archetype is an early-stage venture capital fund focused on backing crypto entrepreneurs who are working to accelerate the decentralized future. We lead investments in seed-stage companies and are always open to speaking with crypto-native founders. For more information on our team and portfolio, go to archetype.fund.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Archebyte. I'm your host, Catherine Wu. Each week at Archebyte, we have on the smartest voices in the crypto industry to tell us what's top of mind for them. I'm joined today by Justin Melillo, co-founder and CEO of Mona, the leading 3D world-building platform and social network. As a 3D artist and creative technologist for over 12 years, Justin has worked with world-class teams and clients such as Magic Leap, DreamWorks Animation, and more. I'm so excited to have Justin on today to chat all things metaverse and what the future holds for us. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, Catherine. Thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the topic that we're exploring today, but I'm most excited to have an excuse to talk about my favorite video game at the moment, Tears of the Kingdom, but we'll get to that later.
Same. Yeah, I'm so excited. So many hours lost this weekend in Hyrule.
Oh, my favorite place in the world.
Same.
Okay, so to kick us off, I want to take some time, and I don't always do this, but I really want to talk a little bit about your background because I think you come from such an interesting, unique place from a lot of the computer scientists or devs that I usually interact with. So tell us a little bit about your background, where your career got started, and how it led to you starting Mona.
So my background is actually more so rooted in art than programming. I've actually been an artist for as long as I can remember, always very interested in making things, creating, drawing, painting. And this led me to get my degree in computer animation and visual effects from the School of Visual Arts in New York. After which I became a freelance VFX artist, producing 3D content for different studios in the city, shortly before joining DreamWorks Animation out in LA. While I was at DreamWorks Animation, I got really immersed in the world of feature animation production, but I was always very curious about what the next phase of technology and entertainment would be, particularly how people would interact with digital content in the future. And that's when I started getting really into virtual reality and augmented reality, and started diving more into this new realm of the future of tech and immersive content. And I started learning about a company called Magic Leap, which was producing what was going to be the preeminent AR headset that would actually let you interact with 3D content in the world around you. So I left DreamWorks in 2016 to join Magic Leap, where I started working on a project building a digital human that you could interact with in AR, and a number of other exciting projects, all the while starting to learn about this thing called blockchain, and started learning about one project in particular that caught my eye, which was CryptoKitties. And at the time, I saw that there was something really interesting there, but it did take me a while to have real clarity on where this was all headed. And so the aha moment really dawned on me at the beginning of 2021 after I saw that Beeple had sold his Everyday's piece at Christie's for $69 million. So up until that point, I had been a freelancer my whole career and working with companies like DreamWorks and Magic Leap. I had also designed tour stages for artists like Drake. I'd been building AR, augmented reality experiences, but this was the first time that I started learning about 3D artists making a living without being in that freelance studio setting. They were carving out careers for themselves as legitimate artists. And this was all made possible by blockchain. So I started learning more about Ethereum. And this led me to realize that decentralization was really the missing piece to a number of different thoughts that I had had over the years, everything from this idea of games being art themselves, but also what the future of the internet was going to look like. And so this led me to call up my really good friend, Matt Hoerl, and together we started Mona.
That's an incredible and very unique path, at least in crypto thus far. But it's so funny because everybody has like that one moment where they're like, wait, this interacts with, like, crypto intersects with everything that I've known so far, and kind of carve out their own niche for themselves, which is amazing. Okay, so our topic today is the metaverse. And I think the metaverse has become kind of like a hot topic. I think it, like, in my opinion, entered the mainstream when like Facebook announced it was going to change its name to Meta, kind of as a reference to that. But I think even then, even so, everyone thinks about the definition of metaverse pretty differently. Like to me, for example, like, we joke about Hyrule being my favorite place in the world, but like to me, it's a real place, right? So I guess for you, what is your definition of quote unquote the metaverse?
So, yeah, it's interesting seeing and sort of funny seeing that it really entered the mainstream with Meta's announcement. But yeah, for those who don't know, the metaverse was actually a term that was coined by author Neil Stephenson in his book Snow Crash. And while many people have, I think, a number of different ideas or definitions of the metaverse, I think the easiest way to really sum it all up and for anyone to really kind of grasp the concept is to think of the metaverse as the future of the internet and the sort of realization that the future of the internet is immersive. I think that's the easiest way to think about it. Over the next 5 to 20 years, we're going to see a transition from consuming content via 2D interfaces, consuming the world's information in this 2D style, to consuming content in 3 dimensions with digital content eventually blending seamlessly with the world around us. That is the metaverse.
I like that framing. It's less so like you have to define what it looks like. Like the future of internet, how it's immersive is actually just one part of our current experience, but kind of like leveled up, if you want to use gaming terms. Like, I think that's a much easier way to grasp.
Yeah, I love that. It's like leveling up all of our current experiences. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is we've already been in the metaverse for a while. I think people are constantly asking the question, when is the metaverse going to happen? Or now we're seeing articles saying, oh, the metaverse is dead. But you have to realize you have hundreds of millions of people, and a lot of them a younger demographic this is the norm for them, connecting in this medium of digital experiences, trading, virtual clothing, avatar skins, digital assets and objects. This is just a small glimpse into the future that we're going to be living in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, part of it, I guess, what you're saying is also it's not so much how it looks; it's more like your experience, right?
Yeah.
Like so like when my parents think about metaverse, they're like, oh, it's the fake buildings with fake people running around, and I'm like, well, that's like a world, I guess, but it's not the metaverse.
Yeah, no, exactly. And just like we spend all our days on calls over Zoom now, very soon in the future, we're going to be spending calls via volumetric capture, where I could actually see the digital representation of yourself as it's live captured from whatever setting you're in and get the sense of that connection and telepresence with you, even though we're not in the same geographic location. That's all part of it too. It really comes down to experience, like you said, and human connection.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of, just going back to Meta and kind of these like big announcements of, who's entering the space and what, it seems to me like a lot of these bigger name or like, I guess, Web2 or big tech platforms are building like their own version of what they think a metaverse is. And obviously there's been, as folks who work in the Web3 space, and you spoke earlier about decentralization, how does building an open metaverse, much like what you're doing at Mona, different from these legacy or bigger efforts to build their own metaverses?
Yeah. So the metaverse to me doesn't work without decentralization. So I think a lot of legacy companies or Web2 companies, they take a very opinionated approach to ownership and distribution of content and the experience itself. And you end up with what a lot of people call the walled garden, the idea that you can do and play and have so much freedom within a certain context, but you can't take any of your assets or your experience outside of this construct that these companies have created, like Meta. And so the sad reality of purchasing and owning, say, a skin in Fortnite is that if Fortnite were to ever cease to exist, the value held in that asset that you purchased evaporates instantly. And so that's the importance of this idea of the open metaverse, which is one where the user has true ownership over all of their content, all of their data. And, that's really where Mona exists, is as that visual abstraction for the ownership of decentralized 3D assets that will underpin this new internet that we're talking about. This is the medium by which we're all going to be connecting with each other. And Mona is really going to be that experience layer of the internet. That's what we're building.
Tell us more, because we've referenced now at this point Mona a couple of times. I gave the one-liner earlier. What are you building exactly at Mona? And can you also explain to us, I guess, in the narrow construct of like open metaverse plays, how Mona is also differentiated there?
Yeah, for sure. So Mona is a credibly neutral open platform. And we exist to pioneer these open standards that this next evolution of the internet is going to be built upon. These standards for sovereign, ownable, immersive content and 3D assets. So with Mona, anyone can design and build any type of digital object that could be a 3D asset, an avatar, a wearable, digital fashion, environments, or entire playable experiences or augmented reality or virtual reality experiences. You can build all of that. You can have it uniquely owned and authenticated on Ethereum, and then you can access and enjoy it in any platform or game engine. So Mona has the tooling and infrastructure for that content and experience creation. We also have the highest quality immersive experience that you can get in a web browser. It's all web accessible in a way that today you can start exploring any of the 15,000 experiences that have been uploaded to the platform to date. And we also have a marketplace where creators and developers and anyone can start monetizing their 3D assets, these interoperable digital objects that they own.
As someone who's seen a demo, it is so cool to like, I think of it almost as like, you go onto Mona and in your browser, by the way, so I don't have to like boot up my PS5 or anything. And I just can jump from like, it feels to me like little planets from like one to the other, like, and it feels very seamless. And the most like, I thought it was so awesome, the spatial audio that was built in. Like if I saw someone, not only can you talk to them live, but depending on where I am to the other avatar, like where my avatar is to the other one, where the volume or where the sound comes from changes.
Yeah, that's the spatial voice chat feature is really exciting. That's a recent update that we've added, but I think this all goes back to what we've been talking about, which is how we as humans are going to connect in this immersive medium. And having that spatial voice chat, that spatial audio is such a key feature because audio is such an important part of the human experience. And so to be able to be in an immersive setting is one thing, but then to actually feel like, oh, I can hear you behind me or to the right of me, immediately makes the whole thing feel more real, right?
Yeah. So not only does it feel realistic, it's awesome that you can bring like one asset from essentially one, planet to the other, which is very transferable in that way. And I really like that essentially whoever the user is, that uses or goes to Mona, it's probably a really different experience for every person, right? Because you can bring different things, you can look different ways, you can go to different places. I think the decentralization part actually remixes the experience so that it's more unique to each person.
Yeah, that's a really great insight there. Yeah, it definitely lends itself to each user's unique experience on the platform with all this content.
Yeah. Is this kind of what you're seeing across other sort of like open or decentralized metaverse plays? Is this like a common theme? Is there something that's really different with each of what I guess like people are doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I started building Mona, other sort of decentralization or open metaverse plays were sort of more based around this concept of selling land, which is definitely a compelling idea, but it was never one that really placed the creator or developer first. You still kind of gave people a very limited set of tools to build with, and it was really driven on this speculation that there's a limited amount of virtual space. Yeah. And that never really made a lot of sense to me. You have unlimited amount of virtual space to build in,
No. Okay. You know what I always thought was weird with that is, okay, if you think about the internet is literally the most chaotic, abundant experience you can have as a user, right? And so to build in like limited things that feels also internet native, I think it's just not, it feels weird. It feels weird.
Yeah. Same. It always felt weird to me too. Yeah. So I wanted to take a very firm approach in really placing developers, creators first, much like, with the birth of the internet, where it was this open sandbox to build anything, and you have an unlimited amount of virtual space to build in, why not apply that concept to this idea of what the immersive internet's going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, in that way, you're actually enriching the user's experience too.
Yeah, placing the user first, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's always like something that's, look, for certain, like, if it's a creator's work, I understand the scarcity part, but like selling digital land on the internet is like it feels very at odds, right? With like how crazy the internet is. It just like feels like there's almost too much on the internet, right? So like, yeah, anyways, I think we're on the same page here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's what's great is as an artist, if you wanted to tokenize a one-of-one immersive work or a 3D object, you still can. And then you have that scarcity built in. It's just not at the platform level. We leave it much more open for people to decide how they want to build and create content.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so basically, like, unlike your centralized counterparts, the definition of the metaverse is up to the creator and the users. And then maybe what makes Mona unique is that you guys start from a limitless, boundless kind of space, right? And I think that's why there's so many. How many did you say? 15,000 worlds or something?
Yeah, we have 15,000 worlds that have been built and uploaded now. It's crazy. And we're just getting started. We've been around for just about 2 years, technically less than. And yeah, it's amazing to see just the traction that we're seeing with creators who are building these decentralized experiences. It's just a small glimpse into the future.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the future, actually. That was going to be my next question to you. I wanted to touch on like your future outlook. So what are some trends that get you like even more excited about like the future of Mona or just broader, like the future of open metaverses?
So let's see. Well, definitely, very excited for this future of content blending with the world around us. I know, a lot of people are talking about the Apple headset coming out soon. Everyone keeps saying it's coming out next year. It's coming out next year. So
I literally like just heard about this last weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know things. I haven't heard about this. And I was talking to someone and he was like, when you think about all these big tech companies, like who makes hardware the best, right? And he was like, so you can probably assume that's the next big product release from Apple.
Yeah. I mean, I think they've been talking about it for a while and people have been speculating. So yeah, I think VR, AR, it's definitely a trend and has been for a while. I think AR is going to be very, very exciting. It's still early. We're going to get to it'll be probably more than 10 years before we get to a stage where we have an AR device that is like more like a pair of glasses than a pair of goggles, and something that is more sustainable to wear throughout the entire length of your day if you wanted to. But I think that's really exciting. I think this idea of digital identity and ownership over digital fashion and wearables, that's a trend that, I'm always paying really, really close attention to. I think we actually had a conversation recently about how Gen Z and millennials are these sort of like digitally native generation. But if you look at Gen A or Gen Alpha kids today, they're growing up with it being so commonplace to hang out with their friends in Roblox, in Fortnite, checking out their digital avatars and selling their digital clothing. This is a generation that is growing up to be metaverse native. And I think that is probably the biggest trend that maybe not a lot of people realize is as these kids age out of these platforms, they're just going to be expecting to have these experiences where digital assets in many cases will be worth more than physical counterparts.
By the way, that is like a one-liner that I have stolen from you
Nice.
At multiple occasions and in multiple conversations. Because it was such an aha moment actually for me, because like, the framing is, the kids today, like the Gen Z kids, I guess, they are the smartphone native generation. Duh, that makes sense. And then extrapolate that to Gen Alpha, what you just said, as the metaverse native generation is crazy. Because I think in my head, even though I'm a millennial, I still feel young. I think there's this like weird perception that like I feel young, even though I'm like squarely millennial. And so like the smartphone thing, I feel like I get it, but there really is a big disconnect between our generation that grew up. Like we grew up on the internet for sure, but then it was like pre-iPhone. It was very different. I don't know. I feel like back then it was like, you had like your AIM, you had your MSN, depending on where in the world you are, or you had these chat rooms where you're talking to strangers, which is part of the growing up on the internet experience. But like we said earlier at the beginning of the show, the metaverse is so much more about leveling out the experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, some people are definitely thinking about it, but it's a huge realization, right? It's a totally different way to grow up in the world and a different world to navigate. And yeah, I love that. I might borrow that from you, leveling up the experience. I think that's really what this is all about.
Yeah. I mean, that's really just what you said. Okay. So before the show, I know I was like super excited to talk about Tears of the Kingdom and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I was like trying to think, I'm like, okay, how do I work it into like a conversation about the metaverse? So I was thinking like, one of the questions that a lot of people ask and they probably don't realize it is like a scaling question, right? Which is like, okay, well, when will the metaverse come into my everyday life? And as I was thinking about kind of working this question in, I actually saw a tweet from you, and I'm going to read it here and I'm going to quote you. Okay. You said, games can be art, part of your early thesis for Mona that continues to be proven by the 1,000 experiences on the Mona platform. And you cite the release like Tears of the Kingdom. So let's dissect this tweet. I want to know like what was going on in your brain when you tweeted that.
Well, I was definitely very excited. This was the day of the release for Tears of the Kingdom, so I was definitely very excited for it. And just seeing the gameplay footage and, fully verified now from experiencing it over the weekend, that is a game that I consider to be a work of art. And so in the tweet, I say games can be art. I would say games are art because my personal viewpoint is that these are works of art. But, I don't think it has to be the case. And I think if you ask game developers, not everyone may say that their game is a work of art. But you look at something like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, that is very much an artistic experience for me. I get the same experience personally playing that I get, being in an art museum, stepping really, really close to, like a Rothko or experiencing art in a museum setting. It's a very similar visceral experience, but it's one that you could play and actually experience and interact with. So yeah, that's sort of what motivated me to send the tweet. And it also, I was reflecting on all of these thousands of experiences that have been uploaded to Mona so far, and realizing that, we have probably the largest community and most passionate community of 3D creators. Many of them are game designers, they're architects, they're hobbyist 3D creators who built these really incredible interactive worlds. And as I go through any of the worlds on Mona, I have the same feeling that I have playing Tears of the Kingdom. It feels like a very artistic, creative experience. And, looking at these 3D assets as works of art, going back to the beginning of the conversation, where decentralization has to be at the center of all this is because each of these worlds on Mona, they are tokenized as one-of-one assets. On an open ledger, you can point to who's created it, who owned it, how it traded hands over time. And, no one can touch that. No one can mess with that. It's a trustless system. And yeah, I think that's really has to be key when you're looking at 3D content, immersive content in gaming. These were all the ideas that I tried to sum up with that simple tweet. But definitely, Tears of the Kingdom is a really, really awesome game.
Yeah. Okay. So for people who are huge Nintendo fans, but I guess are new to the concept of a metaverse, or I guess open metaverses specifically, what would an open like Nintendo metaverse look like?
Well, I mean, you look at, Tears of the Kingdom is a great example where you have just this massive open world that feels very endless. It takes hours to just roam around, hundreds of hours to explore and discover new things. I mean, I think if Nintendo were building an open metaverse, this would be the closest that they're getting to it, is an experience like Tears of the Kingdom. I think another like a different example could also be something that's like really close to Animal Crossing, something that's maybe a little more social, where Tears of the Kingdom is very much a single player experience, which, I think you can definitely experience the metaverse as just a solo player. But then if you consider something like Animal Crossing, where you can invite friends to your island and you can interact with your real world friends on, in this island with things that you're building and collecting, and you can trade. I mean, I think that's I think that's also getting pretty close to it if we're looking at examples from Nintendo.
I mean, as someone who has spent over 200 hours each playing Animal Crossing and Breath of the Wild, I am so excited for the future of not just like games, but what an endless metaverse could look like from both a creator and a user's experience. Like, I think part of what makes these games so magical is that the possibilities are literally endless, and your experiences as you go through the game and you move through the game is so unique to your own. It's genuinely amazing, I think, both making me as a user appreciate the creators, but I'm sure for the creators, it's a whole other way for them to remix and think about like the endlessness of their art potential. So yeah, it's like, I think it's so cool.
I love that. Yeah, I think you summed it up so perfectly there. And that word magic, I think that's so key. And I think it's also the key to, the future of this is, that user experience and having that individualized experience, but one that's super, super high quality. I think that's just so important for people.
Yeah. Last question for you. What is one, and maybe you've touched on this earlier, but what is like one huge misconception about the metaverse that you wish more people just like understood more, or like were like didn't think about it that way?
That's a great one. Surprisingly, maybe not so surprisingly, some people think that Facebook owns the metaverse because they changed their name to it. So that's a pretty big misconception, I think. And I think we could extrapolate from that the idea that one person owns the metaverse or will own the metaverse. Again, I think the biggest misconception is thinking that it's going to be owned by one person or one company, when in reality, it's really just going to be the next evolution of what the current state of the internet is. And it's not owned by anyone, but it's owned by many. I think that's probably the biggest thing for people.
Well, where can people go experience Mona for themselves?
Check us out at our website at monaverse.com. You can jump straight in from your web browser, start exploring some really incredible immersive experiences. If you're taking a break from Tears of the Kingdom or want a very similar experience, check us out at monaverse.com. And then definitely follow us on Twitter at Monaverse.
Amazing. Yeah, co-sign that. Everyone go check it out. Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk all things metaverse and for indulging in my love for Nintendo. And yeah, everyone go check Monaverse out.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine. This is so much fun. Really appreciate your time and being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Archebyte. We release new episodes every Wednesday. Don't forget to check out previous episodes if you've missed any. They should be available wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, DM us on Twitter at Archebyte. See you next week.